Okay. Yeah, we'll be fast. Good morning. Welcome to our final higher education hearing of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee number 2 on Education Finance. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Chavez?
Here.
Ms. Kim?
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Here.
Quorum established.
Okay, thank you. So throughout the spring, we've had many discussions on key Assembly priorities related to higher education, focusing on access, affordability, and success. Our actions today will focus on those issues as well as providing additional funding to achieve success in these three areas. First and foremost, we really want to focus on expanding access to higher education. Our plan today will have about 15,000 new slots for California students at the UC and CSU system. We will as well increase financial aid through the Cal Grant program, through the competitive awards, and we'll be launching a new program to bring back summer school to our CSU program to help students take summer classes and, more importantly, graduate sooner so we can free up more slots for California students to enter the CSU system. Before we get going today, any committee member have any comments they'd like to say before we start? Nope. Okay, we'll get right to the action. So we have 16 vote-only items, and I'll read each issue and read the recommendation and have a motion accordingly. And then for the final package related to the UC, CSU, and financial aid package, we're going to bring up each segment and go over that in a bit more detail to have the opportunity for each segment to comment. So with that, we'll start with the California State Library, and issue number 1 is facilities costs and increased facilities costs, and I'm looking for a motion to
Move issue number 1.
approve as budgeted. Okay, motion and a second to approve as budgeted. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Okay, thank you. Issue number 2 in the State Library, increased publication database costs. Looking for a motion to approve as budgeted.
Move issue number 2.
Mr.
Excuse me,
McCarty?
to approve the May revised proposal.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell?
And just a correction, issue number 1 was not approved as budgeted. It was to approve the May revised proposal. Issue number 3, the California Library Services Act. Looking for a motion to approve as
Library Service Act,
budgeted.
number 3.
Approve as budgeted. Motion and a second.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Okay, California State Library, the California Civil Liberties Public Education Program. Looking for a motion to approve budget bill language establishing the California Civil Liberties Public Education Program with a $1 million general fund augmentation. This will allow the state librarian up to 5% of this funding to administer this program.
Move Civil Liberties Library Public Education Program issue 4.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Okay. Lastly, in the state library, this is the California Historical Society, looking for a motion to concur with the Senate action, which provides $521,000 in additional general fund support on a one-time basis for this program.
Move issue 5, California Historical Society.
Motion and a second.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Okay. Issue number 6, the University of California is a technical adjustment to the cigarette, tobacco, surtax, and research account. Looking for a motion to approve the May revised proposal.
Move issue 6, Cigarette and Tobacco Products Surtax Fund Research Account.
Second that.
Okay. Motion and a second.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Okay, issue number 7, the Sustainability Plan Adjustment. Looking for a motion to approve the May revised proposal.
Move issue 7, Sustainability Plan Adjustment. Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Okay. Hastings College of Law, issue number 8. This is the base operations increase. Looking for a motion to approve the governor's budget proposal.
Move issue 8, Base Operation Increase for Hastings College of Law. Second.
Motion and a second.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay, the second Hastings issue, this is related to the increased lease revenue bond authority for the new facility. Looking for a recommendation and a motion to approve the April finance letter.
Move issue 9, increase lease revenue bond authority for Hastings College of Law.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim? Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay. Next, California State University, issue number 10. This is the vesting trailer bill language. The recommendation is to adopt placeholder trailer bill language to state that the CSU employees hired after July 1st, 2017 shall not be eligible to receive retiree health and dental benefits until they have worked for the CSU for 10 years, subject to collective bargaining.
Move issue 10, vesting trailer bill language for CSU.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim? Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay. Issue number 11, we start with the California Student Aid Commission issues. This is related to Cal Grant caseload and TANF adjustments. Looking for a motion to approve the May revision proposals.
Move issue 11, Cal Grant caseload TANF adjustments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim? Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay. Issue number 12. This is the April finance letter. Related to some technical issues with the CSU. Looking for a motion to approve the April
Move
Student
issue,
Aid Commission finance letter.
move issue 12, April finance letter.
For the Student Aid Commission, not CSU.
Student AIDS Commission, right?
Correct. Okay. Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim? Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay, issue 13, the Student Aid Commission grant delivery system. Looking for a motion to approve the May revision proposals.
Move issue 13, grant delivery system for California Student Aid Commission.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim? Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay, issue 14, the Student Aid Commission College Futures Foundation. Looking for a motion to approve the May revised proposal.
Move issue 14, College Futures Foundation.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Kim? Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay, issue 15, Student Aid Commission programs adjustments related to Graduate Apple, Snapple, and some other miscellaneous adjustments. Looking for a motion to approve the May revised proposals.
Move issue 15, program adjustments to May revised proposals of California Student Aid Commission. Second.
Motion and a second on issue 15. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Irwin? Ms. Kim? Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay. Lastly, issue 16, the Student Aid Commission College Access Tax Credit Fund. Looking for a motion to approve the May revised proposal.
Move issue 16, College Access Tax Credit Fund for the California Student Aid Commission.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez?
Aye.
Ms. Irwin? Ms. Kim? Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay. Just a 30-second break right here. Okay, we'll now begin with the action items for the UC, the CSU, and the Student Aid Commission. we'll start with the University of California. You can bring up the Department of Finance, the LAO, and the UC Office of the President. Good morning. So what I'll do is I'll read, of course the package is already in the agenda, but I'll summarize the highlights and then allow the Department of Finance and the LAO and the University of California to provide some commentary before we bring it back to the members and entertain a motion on the entire package. So this of course, is the UC package. And this, frankly, is a follow-up to the action that we took a few weeks ago. And this really focuses on a couple years of work, bringing an opportunity to expand opportunity for Californians to have access to the University of California. We want to emphasize at the get-go that there's some disagreement on whether or not the UC needs $10,000 per student to educate a kid in California, and there is no disagreement. We agree 100% that it costs approximately $10,000 in taxpayer funding, plus, of course, the student fees to educate a UC student. However, we disagree on how we could come up with that $10,000. We think that we have a shared sacrifice approach, and so that's what we're focusing on. And our plan does provide significant new general fund support. But again, we think that UC can do much more to support this enrollment growth. We're calling on the UC to embrace some proposals that already came out in the state audit. And we also believe that a slight increase in about 3.5–4% non-resident tuition should help and can help Californians gain access to the UC system. I also want to call attention to a change we are making from our initial interim action 2 weeks ago. Instead of creating a new inspector general for the UC to help us come up with some UC efficiencies, we are instead calling on augmenting the state auditor's budget to allow for ongoing audits and opportunities for efficiencies at the UC. This was a suggestion of Mr. Chavez, and so we're embracing that today. This reduces creating a new bureaucracy and allows our state auditor to continue to look at ways that UC, again, can reduce costs and, frankly, focus on increased student access and enrollment. We also want to mention that we're taking a stand against UC's recent pension actions. Our intent last year was really to focus on capping pensionable salaries at the state level, both as a fairness issue and as a cost issue. And we don't support the opportunity to provide the cap and then double dip over here with a 401k type product. We think that that's not fair to Californians, the taxpayers, and frankly, the money we can save can be redirected and focused on increased UC access. And then lastly, we have an additional action that can help us increase diversity and equity related to UC faculty and staff throughout the system. So with that, this is the package here, and we want to allow the Department of Finance, the LAO, and the UC to provide some initial commentary, and then we'll bring it back to the members. Department of Finance.
Good morning, Maritza Urquiza with the Department of Finance. We have some brief comments on the overall UC budget package. The governor's budget and May revision proposed spending levels that are consistent with a multi-year funding plan for the UC. These are funding levels that we believe are sustainable within the level of general fund resources that we project will be available. So we oppose the funding levels in the UC package recommendation, which includes significant spending above the governor's proposals. While the administration concurs with the expectation that UC manage its cost structure and expand access, as we've stated in prior hearings, we are concerned about provisions mandating UC to spend on certain activities. We believe that there are other ways to engage with the university to meet certain state expectations. And finally, we are concerned about an enrollment allocation, which continues to make the number of seats available rather than performance of students the driver of state budgeting for the UC. So thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. LAO?
Jason Constantoros, LAO. No comments on the package today. Just available for any questions you might have.
Thank you. To the University of California?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Kieran Flaherty from the University of California, in Deputy to the Chief Financial Officer. So I'd like to start today by thanking you very much for one of the provisions in the package, and that's the budget bill language that would augment the UC budget by $6 million of general fund to support an increase in graduate enrollment. We very much appreciate that the subcommittee recognizes the importance of the graduate mission that the university has. Professional, doctoral, and graduate master's students contribute greatly to our state, not the least of which is by becoming our future teachers for future workforce. And when we're talking about enrollment growth in such drastic and really huge ways, it's important to acknowledge that we need to have a sufficient workforce of teachers, among other things. I also want to mention and thank the Chair for your leadership with respect to the academic preparation and educational partnerships. I know that the Chair met with our Vice Provost for Diversity and Engagement. I believe that was at the Legislative Black Caucus, and chose to bring those programs and highlight those programs to the forefront here before this subcommittee. So we really appreciate that type of engagement. We're extraordinarily proud of all of our SAPEP programs. And this is a partnership and an investment that's well worthwhile. So we are very grateful for augmentations in that area. It does acknowledge that there's a need for permanent, ongoing, sustainable funding in this area if they're to continue to deliver on their mission. I also want to acknowledge that there is a $2 million general fund augmentation. I believe this is in the form of one-time funds around the issue of faculty diversity. And we really appreciate the focus that's been brought to that issue as well. It's something that, frankly, we've really struggled with, and it's something that we have existing programs already in place that we're currently making expenditures towards that will bear fruit. They will show success. Additional resources will only assist in that endeavor. With respect to a couple other issues, there is one augmentation that we're very pleased about, and this is also in the form of one-time funding. And this would be the placeholder trailer bill language for the UC Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative, similar to AB 2664 by Assemblywoman Irwin. And we're very grateful for the Assemblywoman's leadership on this issue as well. Part of the reason why we feel that this is so important is because this is not just about the state funding UC research. Quite to the contrary, it's actually about the university taking a more external-facing approach towards economic development in the regions and areas around our campuses. So with a relatively modest investment, we will be able to provide everything from legal services to additional bench research space to laboratory equipment, whatever the need for entrepreneurs in California need to bridge that gap between their knowledge and their degree and their desire to move out into the workforce and start a business and employ people. So we're really very pleased with that, and we're very grateful for that. One thing that we'd like to point out on some of the reporting requirements, we're certainly happy to amend our expenditure for instruction report, the cost of instruction report, in any way that the legislature might think would be helpful to them. We'd just like to ensure that we're engaging with you as we go through that process. There's language here to amend the state statute to have the university include information about the National Association of College and University Business Officers methodology for this, and we're certainly happy to include that information. We did review that methodology in depth as we were preparing our expenditure for instruction report. There were some what we view to be shortcomings with that in some instances, given the nature of some of our campuses having extensive health sciences instruction that really has sort of a disparate impact on expenditures at one campus as opposed to other campuses. So we were looking for some methodology that sort of accounts for all of these factors, but we certainly can include information about the NACUBO methodology and run numbers and those sorts of things with respect to NACUBO as well. So happy to do that. There was additional budget bill language related to outside professional activities. This is something that this subcommittee and the counterpart in the other house actually addressed as well. Most of those requirements comport very well with the type of reporting that we prepare annually for public consumption and also for the regents. We think that with some minor changes, we can put that together and produce that report for you as well. I think we understand the issues that you're trying to address and assess, and we would just want to continue to work with you on that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and we'll continue to work on that as well. There also is additional reporting language as part of the package related to the PPIC report and what they identify in that report as a deficit in the amount of degrees, baccalaureate degrees needed to fill workforce needs in 2030. And the report would indicate that you're on a very, very aggressive trajectory of enrollment growth. And I just want to state that we absolutely do support the idea of growing California enrollment. We're growing California enrollment by 5,000 students in the coming academic year, 16-17. But it's important to note that the level of growth in that plan actually would not be consistent with the master plan, not sustainable without some type of negative impacts to our students moving forward. And it has to be funded, and that's a very important point. We do want to work with the state to develop some sound plans for growth, and adopting a major revision of the master plan like this, we think, deserves a very deliberative process with multiple stakeholders from government, among all the segments, K through 12, to figure out how we could actually get something like that done. So increasing eligibility and the enrollment growth for an additional 250,000 baccalaureate degrees in fewer than 15 years is really a major undertaking. And so assuming that the PPIC estimates are correct, we would be adding 5,000 students every single year for a total of 70,000 or more. So we would really need to look at the model in the past, which has been to build new campuses when undertaking that type of enrollment growth, and campuses that are in the 25,000 to 27,000 student range currently would have to, in the absence of creating whole new campuses, which is a very, very expensive endeavor, the current existing campuses would need to be looking at the 40 to 45,000 range. So there's a lot of, in a short period of time, there's a lot of impact and a lot of needs with respect to growth. Currently, I'd like to point out as well, and I appreciate the acknowledgement from the chair around the state share of cost for enrollment growth. Unfortunately, the way we're looking at this is growing 70,000 enrollment is really $700 million. And coming up with that kind of funding in addition to the facilities funding that would be needed is really an extraordinary undertaking, and it's one that we definitely need lots of conversation and collaboration and certainly action. I don't want to say that we're unwilling to move and take action, but we really feel like we need to be very, very deliberate in that process. The plan that was approved by this subcommittee, although over a 6-year time frame, would involve a very significant state general fund investment. Per student for enrollment growth, it comes out after 6 years to be less than $7,000. So our argument is that we think the state should continue to make a $10,000 per student investment in enrollment growth, and that is in a way, I don't know what the right word is, but maybe sacred for us. We really feel like that's where a public institution can get public funding and have it put to really good use. as opposed to supplanting that public funding with a private resource in the form of tuition, for instance. So the first year of the plan, because it's phased in, would actually have enrollment growth funded at $4,000 per student from the state share, from the state general fund share. So I know there's some disagreement on how we might count state general fund share, but for purposes of additional augmentation of state general fund, that's the way we're viewing it. So that goes in the opposite direction of what we think is necessary to massively grow enrollment in the out years. There's a divestment on a per student enrollment of state general fund at the same time that we're looking for an investment to grow enrollment. And so that is a concern of ours. So I think I've probably said enough there, and would be happy to respond to any of the questions that you might have. And then finally, just with respect to pension, I just want to mention that the university does look at this in a very comprehensive way. So there are advantages, a net savings that are associated with implementing a pensionable salary cap that is consistent with the state, with the state's Public Employee Pension Reform Act, the PEPRA cap. With those net savings, we have elected to reinvest in the university to pay down our unfunded liability. The very significant contribution from the state, from Proposition 2, for paying down the unfunded liability is a very important component of that. And we're looking to go towards this kind of financial sustainability, with retirement reform being one aspect of the overall broader financial sustainability drive. We're looking at that at the same time wanting and needing to maintain our quality for our students, for our hospitals, for our workers. And so the reason why we went with a supplement along with the traditional defined benefit was to try and respect that principle. The option of a defined contribution choice for new employees moving forward is also intended to respect that principle. With respect to the defined contribution choice, many of our workers in our workforce, they come from very diverse background. There's limited term appointments. There are many folks who are not with us for the 5-year vesting period. We'd like to be making an institutional commitment towards them as well for their retirement. And we really think that with the default provision being into the traditional defined benefit plan, that it truly is a voluntary option that we'd like to offer for our workers. So to close on a high note, we're grateful for the many investments that the subcommittee is looking to make, new funding that the subcommittee is willing to make, and appreciate that very much, as well as the focus on certain of our program areas that we really are proud of and think they can deliver well for the state.
Thank you. Questions or comments from committee members? Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes, I just wanted to speak to Mr. Flaherty's comments. Thank you. I realize that this committee in particular has set a very high bar, and I think you've been rather articulate in explaining that, and I understand that, and I hope the goal that we've set out is achievable. I'm not quite convinced it is today, but it's going to take a number of factors to get us through, a number of discussions, if you will, to get us through this, and this is a process too. And I think, if you just back up and look at the conversation, from 50,000 feet, if you will, I think and we're turning now, I think, with you, quite frankly, your presence here last year, we were pretty much stonewalled in conversation with the UC. This year we've had more conversations. But what I urge your organization to do is be more proactive rather than reactive. Maybe in the fall, we can have a variety of conversations centered around about how we look at, how we evaluate, maybe is a better way of saying it, the mission of the UC, and also how we better meet some of the goals we've laid out in this committee and in the larger body. And it's, when I say proactive, and maybe you could come to us, tell us what you can do as opposed to what you can't do. That would be, I think, a conversation everybody on this body would be appreciative of. And again, I just do want to highlight that I realize that we've set a high bar here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman. I really appreciate those comments, and I absolutely agree. I think the can-do approach could be very successful, and I hope to move on with even more and better engagement.
Assemblymember Chavez.
I'd like to state publicly that I agree that the quality of education needs to be maintained. As I've talked to your leadership a number of times, I know this committee here focuses on the budget because that's our task, but I would think the greatest thing that should be in front of the chancellor's and the president's mind always is the quality of education for the students to receive. I'm intrigued by the number by the PPIC, says how fast we have to grow and how many degrees we need. I don't know if that's all accurate, but if it's true, as you're laying out, that there'd be another campus required to do that, we're going to be here for some years from now. Maybe if that's a pathway we have to go in our discussions over the next 5, 6, 8 years. Maybe I would love to be part of that discussion and what you have to make the goals for. But there is one issue I'd bring up because one of our members in the Assembly brought it here on the May 10th meeting when that was a subcommittee for the Aerospace Institute on the UC campus. I know you guys had a little pushback on that. How do you think that would go forward? Or how do you think we can come to that conclusion in the future?
I'm sorry, Assemblyman, you were referencing the Aerospace Institute.
Right.
So just in general, with respect to new initiatives, what's really important for us to try and establish and deal with is the amount of resources that are not only needed initially, but to sustain specific efforts ongoing. So our budget that the regents propose and approve in November, prior to this 16-17 year in November of 2015, really reflects the priorities that we think are doable. Certainly we're open to additional efforts and institutes, particularly in the area of research. We are the state's research arm. But as far as the exact resources that are necessary, we'd need to take another harder look. We're perfectly happy to take the resources that the legislature has identified for specific purposes related to research and try and parlay that into something that's a benefit for the state. But it's just it wasn't a proposal that we had worked on at the system-wide level when we were starting to put together the budget back in November.
Would you be willing to work with us next year on that Aerospace Institute?
Be happy to work with you, Assemblyman.
The reason I'm highlighting that is because in the Governor's Military Council that met last week, one of the areas that we're looking at from the Department of Defense and California's effort is to continue to be the innovators on aerospace, to make California, when they think of Space Command and satellites and threats from space, that the technology center be in California. So I'll talk to Assemblymember Lackey to work on that, and I'll ask to be part of that. But this is something that's really important to the military's the Governor's Military Council, and obviously important to Mr. Lackey for those reasons. And I'll just end this. Thank you for your commitment, and I'll go work with him on that. And I'll just end at one thing. Your efficiencies that you're talking about, I think when we can make sure that students are getting out of the UC system, in 4.5 years, that's going to open up a lot of seats. That's good. So it'd probably be cheaper to get people in and out in 4.5 years than to build another campus. So if we could be part of that discussion, and I believe you're having your people come to see me about the activity-based costing and everything, so I'm waiting for that meeting. Because I think that with us all being here for 8 years, I think we can make systemic changes to make us more efficient.